Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I would like to address the issue of is Zimbabwe heading for another disputed 2023 election? Wow, we are already in a disputed election. It's not a question of whether or not we are heading there. We are already there. ZEC has failed to produce a verified voters roll. I'm disappointed by the reaction of some of the Zimbabweans who somehow have been making this a big issue all along. And when ZEC decided that they produced a delimitation report uh, without a verified voters roll, the people switched on to discuss the delimitation report. This is ridiculous. The delimitation report is deciding on the boundaries of the constituencies. And that decision has got to be based on a voters' roll. So if the voters' roll is in shambles, surely the delimitation report is in shambles too. I think this brings back the issue of we are failing to um, draw lines on issues. The rule of law is important. And not only that, it is also equally important to be able to say there are red lines beyond which one should not go. There are certain basic rules that must be observed for the elections to be meaningful. To me, a verified voters roll is one of those. How can you have a meaningful election when you cannot verify who is eligible to vote? Are all those people who are eligible to vote allowed to vote? Then they are on the voters roll. If you don't have a voters roll, you don't know that. And if you don't have a verified voters roll, you don't know who is going to vote. And the other day, we saw a video of ZANU-PF members being bused from the rural areas into urban centers in Harare to go and register to vote. We know we've seen this happen before. ZANU-PF is boosting its own votes by uh, busing in people from the rural areas into urban centers so that they can vote there. No doubt they would have registered in their rural constituency too, and they will vote there. And then as soon as they voted there, they'll be passed into the urban center and they can vote again. This is why it is important to have a verified voters roll. Without a verified voters roll, you'll never know how many times some of these people are able to vote. We have got to learn that rules matter. And we've got also to learn to say there are certain rules that are so fundamental that if you break them, the whole process becomes totally meaningless. These 2023 elections are totally meaningless. For that very reason, we failed to produce a verified voters roll. Another issue, which to me was a no-no, was ZANU-PF's decision to deny the 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote. In a country where in the 2018 election, Mnangagwa won those elections with 2.4 million votes. To deny 3 million, surely, is totally unacceptable. So if we say the number of voters who voted in 2018 were 5 million, the 3 million brings up to a potential voters roll of 8 million. So you are denying 3 million. That's 37% of the potential voters, the vote. The main reason for it, according to Patrick Chinamasa, is that they will not allow people in the diaspora to vote as long as the sanctions imposed on the West are still there. This is a ridiculous argument. Why should the people in the diaspora be denied their fundamental right because the ZANU-PF government has quarreled with the West? What has that got to do with those people in the diaspora? The real reason, of course, is that most of the people in the diaspora are either as economic refugees or political refugees or both. And they blame ZANU-PF for their status. They're not likely to vote for ZANU-PF then. And so ZANU-PF is now cherry picking on who can vote. And they've cherry picked to deny 37% of the potential electorate the vote. How can that election process be free, fair, and credible? This is the question that any observer who is coming to Zimbabwe to observe this election has got to ask themselves. How can the election process be judged to be free, fair, and credible when you have denied 37% of the potential voters the right to vote? How can you say the election is free, fair, and credible when you fail to produce a verified voters roll? What exactly are we observing here? We have no verified voters roll. We don't know who is voting. These people who are coming in to vote in urban centers are voters from rural areas. The urban centers, the urban voters are being denied the vote. And the vote is being given to somebody who doesn't even live in that constituency. How can that process be considered free, fair, and credible? These elections is not a question of we are heading for another disputed election. The whole process is disputed already. And I think Zimbabweans, we need to wake up to the reality that rules are there for a purpose. And there are certain rules where when you cross them, you say this process is becoming totally meaningless. Why, of course, the opposition keeps participating is something that cannot be ignored. They are the ones who make a lot of noise about reforms, but they're only paying lip service to reforms. Indeed, MDC leaders had the opportunity not to ask ZANU-PF to implement reforms, but to implement reforms themselves. They did not. During the GNU, 5 years, and they failed to implement even one reform. And now they're participating because all they want is they know ZANU-PF is giving away a few gravy train seats to entice the opposition to participate. And as long as those seats are on offer, they will keep on participating. People have got to wake up to the reality that the opposition is no longer fighting for reforms and free and fair elections. They are pretending to fight for those things when in reality they are no longer interested. They are participating to give ZANU-PF legitimacy in return for a few seats on the gravy train. I think we need to inform our own people of that reality so that we can change this system. It is absolutely unbelievable that 43 years after independence, in this day and age, we are still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Not for the benefits of the white colonialists or anybody else, but for our own benefit. We are the ones who are denying ourselves that fundamental right. And I think that has got to be seriously cross examined. These elections are being rigged, and they're being rigged in advance, and they should be condemned here and now. ZANU-PF should be denied legitimacy at the end of the 2023 rigged elections. If ZANU-PF does not have legitimacy, we will then have another GNU as in 2008. We can then make sure that this time the democratic reforms are implemented so that we have got free, fair, and credible elections. It is not rocket science implementing these reforms. Just because MDC leaders sold out on reforms doesn't mean no one else can implement them. No, does it mean that we do not need reforms anymore? We need reforms now. Without reforms, we will never have free, fair, and credible elections. And without free and fair and credible elections, we will be stuck in this endless cycle of rigged elections and bad governance. Enough is enough. We must end this madness. Thank you and good night.